Royalty protects its own, unless you fall out of line. I wasn't just disowned by my family, I was erased. But they forgot I carry their blood, and the strength of the truth. This is the story of how I lost everything, and returned with more than a crown. I returned with my dignity. The palace was beautiful, but it was not mine. I was born as Princess Evelyn of House Olborough, the second daughter to King Harold and Queen Mariana, rulers of a centuries-old lineage seated in the northern reaches of Europe. A kingdom that thrived on elegance, tradition, and silence. A silence that buried scandal deeper than any grave. I wore pearls before I could spell my name. I learned 5 languages before I was 10. I curtsied before I could walk properly. Everything in my life was scripted, rehearsed, approved. But I never once heard the word freedom. I was raised to be graceful, loyal, obedient, but never free. My older sister, Arabella, was the perfect heir. Graceful, sharp, diplomatic. She knew how to smile with her teeth and stab with her words. She was everything a queen should be. And I was the second choice, the backup, the spare, the one always standing 2 steps behind in every portrait, every parade, every pageant of royal life. They dressed us the same for years, blue velvet, white gloves, the scent of rosewater in our hair. But only one of us was ever truly seen. The spotlight adored Arabella, and I lived in her shadow, until I dared step into the light on my own terms. His name was Thomas, a commoner. He was hired to restore the palace gardens, centuries of history tangled in ivy and time. I first saw him from the window of the East Wing library, a smudge of dust on his cheek, a leather journal in his hand, and a look in his eyes that didn't shrink before royalty. He had a quiet confidence, a warmth that didn't waver in the presence of royal titles. We met in secret. At first, just exchanges of words, then laughter, then hours, then hands, brushing in the moonlight, hearts blooming like roses in rebellion. I was 24, and it was the first time I felt like I was writing my own chapter. I knew the risk. Loving someone outside the royal circle was scandalous, but hiding who I was, what I felt, that was unbearable. I thought I could hold both worlds in my hands. I thought love would protect us. We were caught. A court servant, bribed by someone who knew exactly where to hurt me, followed us. They found us beneath the rose arches near the greenhouse, laughing like fools in love. The queen summoned me that night. Her eyes burned with something deeper than anger. It was betrayal. To her, I hadn't just disobeyed protocol. I had embarrassed the crown. You are not a daughter of this house, she said. Not anymore. And just like that, everything I knew, my name, my title, my future, vanished. I was exiled from the palace the next morning. No press, no public disgrace, just silence. They buried my name like a secret, too shameful for the tabloids. A royal death without a funeral. Thomas and I fled to a coastal village. He found work as a carpenter. I taught local children to read. We were poor but real, free. We married in a crumbling church with wildflowers in my braid and only the wind as our witness. For a while, I believed we could be happy. We built a small life from scraps. I wrote letters to my sister Arabella for years. Apologies, please, silence. Not a single reply. She who once braided my hair now acted like I never existed. When Thomas died 5 years later, a fever the doctors couldn't name, I screamed her name into the sea. No one answered. I was widowed, forgotten, and invisible, until one morning, a newspaper wrapped around a loaf of bread changed everything. There it was, printed in smudged ink and folded into the corner of the paper. Queen Mariana dies peacefully in her sleep at age 73. The crown passes to Her Majesty Arabella, Queen of Olborough. Beneath it, in smaller text, all descendants and royal bloodline members are summoned to the estate for succession formalities and council review. They needed me. I almost laughed. After a decade of pretending I didn't exist, the palace was calling me home. Not because they forgave me, not because they missed me, but because my blood still mattered. A clause in the royal constitution stated that for any matters involving inheritance of estate lands tied to family trust, both direct royal heirs, living or dead, must be formally accounted for. I was a royal inconvenience, but this time, I wouldn't go quietly. Part 2. My royal family banished me for falling in love, but I returned to claim the throne they tried to bury. When I walked through the palace gates again, everything looked the same. The marble steps gleamed under the morning sun. The hedges were still trimmed into perfect circles. The flag fluttered above the east tower like it had never once been lowered for me. But I was not the same woman they threw away. I wore no crown, no family crest, Just a soft black dress and my wedding ring, the only title I ever truly earned. The guards didn't recognize me at first. I had to show them my birth certificate. My name, Evelyn of Houselborough, was still written in ink on royal records, just buried beneath 10 years of dust and shame. Inside, the halls echoed louder than I remembered. The portraits of kings and queens, the chandeliers, the long velvet carpets, they looked more like relics than riches. I was escorted to the south wing, into a chamber meant for distant cousins or unwanted dukes. No royal welcome, no sister, no words, until the next morning. Arabella arrived, dressed in cream silk, her crown glinting like a dagger in the sun. Her smile was polite and poisonous. "So," she said, "the wayward daughter returns." "I didn't come for tea," I replied. "Good," she said, walking past me. "We're out of sugar." She led me into the council chamber, where members of the Royal Advisory Board sat in tight suits and thin patience. Documents lined the table. I saw my name circled in red. There it was, the reason they needed me. My mother's will had left several royal land grants to charity and historical trusts, but a clause deep in the charter required both direct heirs Arabella and me to approve final sign-off. The land in question included the Seafell estate, a coastal property historically linked to the crown. Without my signature, the funds couldn't be distributed. The land couldn't be reclassified. In simple terms, I was the key to the lock they'd been pretending didn't exist. Arabella handed me a pen. "Sign it," she said. I looked her in the eye. Not yet. That night, I walked the palace halls alone. I passed rooms where I once danced, corridors where Thomas once waited for me in the shadows. Memories clung to the walls like ghosts. I wasn't there to haunt the past. I was there to find the truth. In the East Wing, I entered my mother's private music room. The harp she played every morning stood in the corner, strings dusty and broken. I lifted the cover on the old piano, nothing but cracked ivory. But then a slip of parchment wedged beneath the soundboard. It was her handwriting, not the official will. A personal letter. It read, "My dearest Evelyn, I have wronged you in ways I can never undo. I let the crown speak louder than my heart. I was raised to protect legacy, not love. But I watched your father die knowing we lost you. I tried to change the council's mind. I failed, but I never stopped thinking of you. This land, Seafell, was always meant for you. Because it was where I first held you in the wind and whispered, 'She will change this world. Forgive me,' and my knees buckled." My mother hadn't forgotten me. She had tried quietly, helplessly to reach me, but Arabella had buried her voice too. I presented the letter to the council the next day. Arabella exploded. She called it forgery, a stunt. She demanded it be burned. But the council wasn't so sure. The signature was real. The date matched the final estate draft. And the words? They sounded like the queen they once knew. The tide was shifting. Arabella requested a private meeting that evening. She arrived without her crown. "You think you've won," she said. "I didn't come to win," I answered. "I came because I was part of this family before you turned it into a throne room for one. You left," she snapped. "You exiled me," I whispered. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. Then she straightened her spine. "She was grooming me to lead," she said. "You were always too soft, too romantic. She groomed us both to obey," I said. "But you made that your personality. I made it my prison." There was no shouting, no tears, just truth laid bare like blood on stone. The next day, the council voted to grant me rightful ownership of the Seafell estate. My name was reinstated in royal registers, not as a princess but as Duchess of Seafell. I didn't take back the palace. I took back my place in history. The official announcement was made at noon on a Friday, a single press release from the royal estate. Lady Evelyn of Houselborough, Duchess of Seafell, has accepted custodianship of the historical Seafell lands, per the revised succession clause in the late Queen Mariana's will. No titles, no apologies, no acknowledgements of exile or betrayal. Just a neat line of royal politeness, tucked in a corner of the kingdom's news like an afterthought. But the people remembered me. I received hundreds of letters, not from nobles or ministers but from gardeners, teachers, librarians, women who saw me at charity events a decade ago, little girls who once waved from behind iron fences, men who remembered the day I knelt in the dirt during a school planning day. You see, I never wanted to be a queen. I wanted to be someone real, and after all these years, it was the real people who welcomed me home. Arabella didn't attend the Seafell ceremony. She claimed unforeseen duties, but I knew She couldn't bear to watch me receive something she couldn't control. The press noticed her absence. Whispers began. Columnists speculated. I wore no tiara that day, just a cream coat and Thomas's wedding ring. The Seafell estate had been abandoned for nearly 30 years. Wild grass swallowed the pathways. Shutters hung loose like broken teeth. I stood at the front gate and felt the weight of my mother's last words in the wind. This land, it was always meant for me. It took months to restore it. I hired local builders. Former students of mine came to help. One brought her daughter wide-eyed, curious. She asked if I was a real duchess. I said, only on paper. In my heart, I'm someone who once lost everything and learned how to start again. We planted a garden where the stables used to be. Roses, daisies, wild lavender. Every bloom was a little rebellion against silence. The palace sent letters, formal ones, cold. One even offered a financial settlement in exchange for permanent withdrawal from royal matters and public representation. I tore it in half and used it to mulch the garden beds. I didn't need their money. I needed my name, and it was mine again. One spring morning, a silver car pulled up the estate driveway. I knew who it was before the door opened. Arabella. No guards, no entourage, just her, in a navy coat, her crown left behind. She stood at the edge of the garden as if unsure where to step. You planted them wrong, she said. They're growing, I replied. She looked at the flowers, then back at me. I wanted to hate you, she admitted. For years, I told myself you were reckless, weak, foolish. I was in love, I said. That's the part I hated most, she whispered. That you love someone enough to leave. I waited. She looked down, as if ashamed of her own power. He was a good man, she said. Thomas. I felt something crack in my chest. You watched us burn, I said. I did. And you let mother silence me. I did. There was a pause. I thought loyalty to the crown meant shutting every door behind me, she continued. But now, I walk through them alone. I should have screamed at her, thrown a spade at her feet, demanded she kneel for forgiveness. But I didn't, because part of growing is knowing which apologies you'll never get and still learning to breathe. She asked if she could walk the garden. I said yes. We didn't speak for the rest of her visit, but she left a single white rose on the bench beside Thomas's memorial stone. And that was enough. The years passed. I opened Seafell's library to the public. I taught literature to children every Thursday. I funded scholarships in Thomas's name, quietly, without press releases. Sometimes I visited the city, watched from afar as Arabella waved from palace balconies, perfect and poised. She ruled a kingdom. I built a sanctuary, and in the end, that made all the difference. On the 10th anniversary of Thomas's death, I stood beneath the rose arch we planted together and spoke his name aloud, not as a secret, not as a scandal, but as a legacy, because love, the kind worth losing everything for, never truly dies. It just changes form. Sometimes it becomes a garden. Sometimes it becomes a girl holding a book, learning to write her own story. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it becomes peace.